Oh, I remember years ago I went to a vineyard conference up at Green Lake in Wisconsin, and the speaker was a guy who had like 3 or 4 plenary sessions and told us in great detail about how he prayed 5 or 6 hours a day. And I came away from that thinking, well, I need to do something like that too. And so I decided I wasn't going to try to pray 5 or 6 hours a day, but I decided that I could pray 1 hour a day. And so it was like trying to go from 0 to 60 in 1 second. And I didn't really know how to pray for an hour a day. I barely knew how to pray for 5 minutes a day. And so I got a notebook and I divided it into subsections and wrote down intercessions here and requests here and various other aspects of things to be thankful for, and then would just make long lists in each of those sections. And basically my prayer was bringing one thing after another up with God and telling God what he needed to do. And he didn't exactly need me to do that. And gosh, I remember once I had a very early in the morning meeting, and so I got up at 3:30 in the morning in order to pray for an hour before the early meeting. And it won't surprise anybody to know that that whole endeavor pretty much crashed and burned. I remember, I think it was Robert Pirsig in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance wrote about eagle climbing, where people were hiking in very steep terrain in the mountains, and you could tell the people who were doing it for ego purposes, I'm going to conquer this mountain, because they'd start out very confident and going very fast, and then they'd be the ones who along the path just basically dropped out because all of that ego energy that they had was used up and they didn't have anything else. And you compare it with people who respected the mountain and took their time and rested when they needed to and actually made it to the top. And I was an ego climber when it came to prayer, and it was a clear expression I see now of my false self. Yeah. And then 5 years ago or so, when I started working as equipping pastor at the Vineyard, one thing I was very excited about was that I was going to have the opportunity to spend more time praying than I had ever had in my life. And so I started trying to do that, and I can only read lists to God and tell him what to do so much. And so I ended up bragging at one meeting that I was praying about 15 minutes a day. And I think it was Caleb Chow who sort of looked at me, and this look was so eloquent. It communicated, and you're bragging about praying 15 minutes a day. And God really used that to convict me. And soon after that, there was this National Vineyard Conference in Columbus, Ohio. And I went forward for prayer at one point, and the guy who prayed for me had a prophetic word, and he said, you're like an archer, and you have a wonderful bow, and you have a quiver, but you don't have any arrows. And that was an intriguing image and an embarrassing image, and I was very interested in finding out, well, what are these arrows that I'm missing? And after a while, God made it clear, and Kitty Kramer confirmed for me that the arrows that I was missing were prayer. Soon after that, I started working with a spiritual director who told me one of the first times that we met that prayer is anything that you do in order to be in God's presence. And prayer is actually being in God's presence regardless of what it is that you're doing while you're there. And I remember thinking, no, that can't be. Yeah. Prayer has to be much more ego climbing than that. And by gum, she was right. about that as well as so many things. And over the years since then, I've learned that there are many different ways to pray, and very few of them involve telling God what to do. And mostly they are just ways to be in God's presence. And so I've been practicing for years the spiritual disciplines of solitude and silence, being alone and being quiet. And it's just recently God's made it even more clear to me that those practices, their purpose, at least for me, is to create a space where prayer can happen. To create a space where I'm tuned into God instead of myself, where I'm respecting God instead of trying to get God's attention like a hypocrite. And in that space, God comes. And the prayer is much more about what God's doing than about what I'm doing. And what a blessing that is, what a gift that is.